Hello and welcome to Chess Lovers channel. Today I'm going to talk about this book, the Caro-Kann, The Easy Way, written by me. Why did I write this book? The main reason is I believe the Caro-Kann defense is the most solid and reliable opening to 1 e4. And what do I mean with the easy way? I mean that it should be easy to develop the minor pieces, especially on the queen side. And the key person I'm going to focus on is the knight on b8, the Queenside Knight, which in several variations become the problem piece. So I will show you some variations to exemplify what I mean. e4 is a very common move in practice. Of course, you must have a reliable defense to that move. And my suggestion is to play c6. Essentially, you can play c6 and d5 against all white setups. For example, after d4, you can play c6. Or you can start with d5, which is a more flexible move, and only now show your card, the Slav defense. We will not talk about it this time. We focus on e4, c6 first. And the normal move is d4 and black replies d5. So the main idea with c6 is to put pressure on the e4 pawn. So if white takes this pawn, black recaptures with a pawn. And then you can see that the c6 squares become available. So this is not the principled continuation. The classical continuation is to continue knight c3, and then we liquidate the pawn on e4. Now we have to liquidate the knight on e4. And my suggestion is to play bishop f5. This is the classical defense, or you can also call it Capablanca's system, because Capablanca was one of the first players who played this variation on high level. Then also Botvinnik have played it, and many other exceptionally strong players. Now, white's best reply is to place a knight on g3, and we stabilize the bishop on g6. One of the critical variations is to harass the bishop on g6 by playing h4. Then we give the bishop an escape square on h7. Knight f3. We should not regard knight e5 as a threat. According to the old theory, knight d7 was the main variation, but we should avoid this. I will explain why. So here you can play knight f6 or e6. You don't need to be afraid of knight e5, because you just play bishop h7 followed by knight d7, attacking the knight on e5. So you want to provoke knight e5. The main variation is to play h5, bishop h7. And now we can see this bishop is very strong. I mean, it's shooting on central squares and on squares on the queen side. So the best combination for white is to exchange the bishop. And white is happy, black is happy to do this exchange, because black has essentially a white square strategy. I mean, the d5 square is black square. And as you can see, this bishop is nominally better than white's bishop, because he has a fixed pawn on d4. So this is a strategical success. So we continue developing the knight, and white go here. It prevents, for example, queen a5 if white castles kingside. And now we come to the essential idea, and that is to play c5. Yes, we are losing a tempo. So what we essentially is doing here is to play the Sicilian defense in slow motion, because we want to take on d4. So after castling long, we put the knight on c6, and as you can see now, both black's knights are on excellent positions, controlling all the middle squares, while keeping the better bishop, while putting pressure on white's d4 pawn. So first we liquidated the e4 pawn, and we forced the e4 knight to retire to g3, and now we attack. We have a full attack on the d4 pawn. So this is the idea. So white has to decide here how to react to this pressure. There are different ways to do it, but we can concentrate on this one. I mean, white wants to put the bishop on the long diagonal. And now we play queen d5. So now we are also playing the Scandinavian, but at the precisely right moment. So you can see here, we are essentially playing three openings: the Caro-Kann defense, the Sicilian defense, and now the Scandinavian defense. So white has to decide how to handle the pressure on a2. For example, if white play this quiet move, black can start a queenside attack introduced by c4, followed by a later b5, b4. So the bishop on c3 will be a target. According to theory, the best combination is to take on c5. And this is what we want if we are black. And as you can see, it's not possible to take on a2, because then bishop takes f6, followed by queen d7 mate will arise. So we just exchange the queens. Normally it is beneficial for black to change queens in the Caro-Kann defense. And as you can see now also the bishop has an excellent place on the classical diagonal, putting pressure on the f2 square. So the main variation is to take here and put the knight back on e4. So we go back to e7. And this is a typical situation which can arise in this variation, the Campora variation. It is called because Campora was a grandmaster who first played this idea, but it has never been so popular, and I have used it myself in several games with success. It's a very logical system to play because it's all about activity in the Caro-Kann defense. So black would like the exchange that takes place here. Then the king can come to e7 and he can exchange rooks, on, at least one pair of rooks on the d file. Okay, we will not go so deeply. You can read more about this position in this book, the Caro-Kann, the easy way. So this is just a way to exemplify one of the main variations. So the main idea is to activate the knight on c6. I show you another topic variations, and that is in the third move. You can play e4 to e5. So you are releasing the pressure on e4 and you are playing a blocked game. And normally we don't mind, but this variation was the toughest to write about. We are talking about the Caro-Kann defense, not the French defense. This variation. So this is a book, the Caro-Kann the easy way. Then you should put the bishop here. Otherwise it will not be so easy. I mean, there are variations where you can play like this. I have played it myself, but this is a pawn sacrifice and you must know a lot of specific theory. This is not the easy way. So it's better to prepare c5, slow motion Sicilian, by playing e6, c5, and you want to put this knight here. I mean, if you put it here, then you want to put the Kingside Knight on c6. So you want a knight there, but now you have a problem with this knight. Where is it going to go in the future? So an ideal setup could be to follow up. For example, we can look at the short variations. If you play classical development with knight f3, e6, bishop e2, you might play c5 in this position. For example, castling knight c6. And white have, for example, the possibility to play c3 or maybe such a move. So now you have solved the problem with the minor pieces on the queen side, and this rook will presumably develop to c8 in the future. But what do we do with the kingside pieces? I mean, the pawn on e5 prevents the knight to be placed on f6 and the bishop on d6. So the pawn on e5 cramps black's kingside. So we have to solve this. So the ideal piece formation for black would be something like putting the bishop here, putting the knight on f5 with maximum pressure on d4, the bishop on e7, and then castle short. So this is what we want. We want an active position with all the pieces. And we have solved the problem with the Queenside Knight. If we don't solve the problem with the Queenside Knight, we are always worse, because white will have a more active position. If we for some reason don't want to put the bishop on e4, it is also possible to place it here. But then the bishop will not be as well placed, and the pressure on d4 will not be as strong. So if you can get such a position, it's the ideal position. I managed to get such a position against Grandmaster Emanuel Berg with great success. I even won the game, just playing according to common sense. Of course, this is a very theoretically demanding variation, but that is only on very high level. So on most levels in chess, you come a long way. Just understand that if you manage to develop the worst piece in your position when you're black, then you have at least equalized. So that is a problem. We always get a problem piece when we are black. For example, in the French defense, you have a problem with the bishop on c8, and in the Caro-Kann defense, you have a problem with the b8 knight. And it is logical, because you play c6. So we are taking away the most useful square for black's knight. For example, Steinis did not understand this move, and I can understand him, because you are killing your own knight. So in Steinis' day, this was the most common move, but here you must also know a lot of theory, a lot of gambits. So if you want to make life and chess easy, you play the Caro-Kann, because you can play c6 and d5 against all variations by white. You just play c6 and d5 and try to activate all your minor pieces and then your major pieces. Okay, so what can I recommend if you feel this is a big problem? This is the critical variation against the Caro-Kann defense, and no question about it. So my other recommendation is to avoid the advanced variation by playing the Scandinavian defense, because then you will secure the same structure. I mean, d takes e4 has already taken place, but it was white who played e takes d5. And for example, after knight c3, queen d6, this is the main variation. You are playing the Caro-Kann, but with an active queen. So I have written 2 books, one about the Scandinavian defense. It is actually here, where I'm writing thoroughly about what I would call the active Caro-Kann, but it is called Peter's variation, or the Peter variation. And if you want to play c6 in the first move, this is my recommendation. In our days, with a lot of computerized variations, a lot of books about different openings, it's very important to play according to common sense, according to classical chess principles. So we must understand what we are doing with every move. That is the main thing. We must understand the opening from beginning to end. So we should focus on model games, representative games, and we should focus on classical opening principles, and only focus on the necessary variations. If you follow these 3 steps, you will be dangerous in the opening. I can promise you. It is as simple as that. So you should essentially not learn variations by heart, unless they are, how to say, you want to complicate the game for your opponent. Then it's actually worthwhile to learn some extremely sharp variations in the Scandinavian defense, for example, where you pick up a pawn on g2 or maybe b2 with a queen. Then you must know what you are doing. But if you don't play such sharp variations, if you play more quiet, then it is enough to learn model games by heart, learn the main variations, and focus on principles, opening principles and classical principles. That is the key to have success in chess and in the openings. Thank you for watching. See you next clip.